I hope you enjoy this evening. We'll be taking questions for each of the presentations after they finish speaking. So wait for them to finish their presentation, and then we'll have 5 or so minutes for each of the presenters. Okay, so I'd like to pass over to Jaime, who will be talking to us.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting this to be kind of live talk, but never mind. So I'm Jaime Vera. I'm one of the consultants at the Royal Sussex County. I'm also a clinical academic. I do research half of my time, and I'm interested in comorbidities affecting people with HIV. I'm also interested in the brain and HIV, but mainly in developing new models of care for aging people with HIV. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about this sort of quality of life from the sort of healthcare professional's perspective. Just trying to kind of set the scene for what it will be a very interesting talk following mine, just talking about how we actually measure these things. Can I use this one? Oop, going the other way. So as I was telling us, there are some targets that were set up by WHO in terms of where we should be with regards to the management of HIV. And this is the UK cascade of HIV care. And in red, you're going to see the targets that were set globally for the management of HIV. And then at the very top in green, you can see the targets that we have already achieved. These are measures from London, but actually for Brighton, we probably do a lot better. So we have hit those targets. 92% in Brighton is 93%. I think Jill is here, she can correct me. Is it 93% in Brighton that are aware of the diagnosis, of which 98% are on treatment and 99% in Brighton are stable on combination antiretroviral therapy. So I think as a physician, this is a fantastic achievement really, because most patients that we are going to be seeing in clinic are going to be patients that are stable on therapy, and that's great. But also it makes you think not only for HIV physicians but for other healthcare professionals. So are the problems solved now? That's it, you know. If these are our targets, then is everything sorted? And I keep pressing the wrong button, but the answer is no. Obviously, the introduction of combination antiretroviral therapy and all these targets have meant that people with HIV are aging, as well as the doctors that are looking after them, right? Yeah, we are all aging. And that's really the trajectory. So this is global data, just looking. And last time that I checked, this was actually a couple of days ago, and the trajectory continues. And this is just looking at people with HIV age 50 and over. Now, you might argue if older is, we start thinking about older about the age of 50, but that seems to be the sort of marker when you are doing aging research. So, you know, people are aging, people are surviving. Life expectancy of people with HIV is matching that of the general population as long as people are diagnosed early. And I keep doing the same. So let's look a little bit about the demographics in the UK. And if you look at this column here, that's 2017, you can see that the proportion of people age 50 and 64 continues increasing. And this just showing you that is the trajectory also in the UK. And if you look between 2008 and 2017, it's been a significant increase. So our population is aging. Brighton is always a special place. Not only sunny, always. It's never windy, never. But also we have a lot of older patients living with HIV. It might be because a lot of patients come to Brighton to retire. That's what I was told before coming to Brighton. But if you look at our cohort, which is probably around 2,400, 2,500 patients, about 56% now are about the age of 50. So we have an aging cohort. In fact, it's probably the oldest cohort of people living with HIV in the UK and one of the oldest cohorts in Europe. So we really are experiencing some of the challenges, probably ahead of the time from other cohorts across the country and in other places like in Europe or even outside high-income settings. But there are lots of challenges, and I think you probably can identify some of these challenges yourselves. And this is from, the work that we have done, the work that I have done, trying to identify some of the challenges that aging people with HIV are facing. And we know about the comorbidities because not only you are suffering some of them, but also every time you go to any meeting, even a community meeting, there is a talk about people with HIV having more comorbidities compared to that of the general population, right? And there have been plenty of studies kind of suggesting the same. Now we've got to be a bit careful here because with aging you start thinking, well, if I have a lot of comorbidities, it's because my body is aging prematurely. And it might not necessarily be the case. So you just put this scenario that every time you come to my clinic and you cough, I do a chest x-ray and I send you to the chest physician. And therefore you're going to be diagnosed with more comorbidities. So there is a little bit of that too, compared to the equivalent HIV negative individual that will never go to the GP until they are really, really unwell, okay? So there is a little bit of that. Regardless of what the situation is, we are seeing more comorbidities in people with HIV, and because a lot of our patients survived the early times when there was no therapy and people were immunosuppressed, there is an immunological sort of price to pay for that. We also have the medications. We were lucky now that we have, lots of different medications, lots of different alternatives, medications with less toxicity that we used to have in the 1990s, and that is great, but some of them also have some complications. There is issues about social isolation, that are associated with aging, cognitive difficulties that people are experiencing as well. We were talking earlier on about chronic pain, and how chronic pain is a big issue now for people with HIV. We're talking about rate probably about 60%. Mental health is a big burden. We start talking about geriatric syndromes in people with HIV. I mean, just imagine that, discussing geriatric syndromes in the 1990s when people were just about to kind of get antiretroviral therapy. It is amazing, but we're seeing more of that. And the big issue about the stigma as well, that is really a very complicated one that actually affects everything really. But I would argue that we have another big challenge now, and it's a challenge that not only you are facing, but we are facing as healthcare professionals. And that challenge really is the current models of care. It's how we are looking after an aging cohort of people with HIV, and that really is a big challenge. So we need to start looking beyond the undetectable. Those targets really are not going to help us that much because most of our patients are undetectable already. So if we are going to have that measure there, it's not really going to help us much. So in 2016, there was a lot of discussions about a new target called good health-related quality of life as possibly the next target, the 490 target. And there is a lot of sort of discussions about that we need to look beyond undetectable. We need to start looking about not only aging with HIV, but aging well with HIV, and how we're going to measure that. So that's what we are going to discuss during the next few minutes. It's about what really is quality of life. And sometimes it's difficult to define what quality of life is. And definitions are important because if you set a target, you really need to know what you are going to be measuring. So you look at quality of life, you look at the definition, really could be just general well-being of individuals, societies, with negative and positive features of life. But really what we are referring to mainly in that particular target is about health-related quality of life, and that's a bit different. It's more a multidimensional concept that includes many things: physical, mental, emotional, social functioning, and so on. And it focuses mainly on health status that has quality of life. But then for other people, quality of life might be just well-being. Again, it's related to health, but it also assesses other things, such as emotions and satisfaction with life. But the question that I'm going to ask you is, for you, what is quality of life? Because for me, quality of life is going cycling for 3 weeks to the Alps and suffer going up the mountains. But for you, quality of life might be something completely different. For some people, it might be just going partying, injecting drugs, I don't know. So I think we need to be very careful about how we define really what quality of life is, because our population is very diverse. So it's very important to define this properly. So how much work have we done in this area? So there's been some work done already by Catalan and Dana Rumsfeld in this area, just exploring a little bit more about what quality of life means for people with HIV. And they did a few focus groups in London with, a diverse population. And these are some things that kind of were highlighted from that work. For a lot of our patients, for a lot of you, financial security is part of quality of life. When you don't have money, it's going to be very difficult to assess your quality of life and to say that you're going to have a very good quality of life. So financial security, it is important. Obviously, good physical and mental health is critical here. But also social relationships and social support, having that sort of group of people that are around you, supporting you. And also functional independence, which again, it goes along with things like cognition. If you start losing independence, then it is an issue. So having that independence is still extremely important in terms of quality of life. And just having that balance, a clear structure and a sense of purpose, which is sometimes very difficult because a lot of patients are aging with HIV were told in the 1990s that they were going to die, that you need to sell everything because you're going to die. And what happened is that, they didn't work, were not working, but they survived. And I think yesterday I was having a discussion at the Sussex Beacon with some patients that are part of an exercise program that we have. And there was a discussion about, I not only have a stigma associated with HIV, but also the stigma of not working and having to tell people that I haven't worked for so many years and that I'm still here not working. So it's just telling you how important it is to have that sense of purpose that sometimes has been lost among all these sort of health, social and mental health challenges that our patients actually have. So how do we measure quality of life? Because that's going to be important. If we have that target, if we're going to be assessing these things to make sure that you have a good quality of life, how are we going to measure this? And I think the important thing here is to define really what quality of life is. If you're going to be measuring, is it going to be health-related quality of life? Then fine. How are we going to measure health-related quality of life? How are we going to define it? What sort of tools are we going to use? And I'm pleased that we're going to be talking a little bit about these patient-reported outcomes because it's something that you probably already have done. You come to our unit, you probably have had to do a few questionnaires asking you things about how you feel on the day. Could be a questionnaire about cognition, could be a questionnaire about mental health. So these are instruments to be able to kind of get some information to evaluate interventions and so on. But we need to be careful about the limitations of some of these tools, because some of the work that was done about quality of life, we realized that actually what people tend to write in these surveys is very different from what people actually really think. So I think there are limitations there, and that happens to all of us. But also, again, our population is very diverse, not only by age, gender, but also socioeconomic status, culture, and so on. So are these tools really going to be able to capture health-related quality of life or quality of life in all those populations? And also we, healthcare professionals, sometimes we have an agenda. We want our services to kind of be funded. So we might be pushing you to actually say, well, are you feeling okay, right? Are you feeling okay, right? Yes, complete this. And there is a little bit of that. So we need to be very careful with this. And also, do we need to actually compare our quality of life or quality of life of people with HIV with that of the general population? Again, in order to kind of fund services and continue with some of the services that we have. And also, we don't really know how often we should be doing this because quality of life can change. Sometimes I just don't feel like, day like today that is rainy. You just want to stay at home. So if you do a measurement at that time, it might not be the same that if it's sunny during the summer. You might not feel the same. And how often should we do it? 6 months, every year? Who is going to do it? So these are the sort of issues that we are facing at the moment. So this is the current model of care, and we're talking about the model of care. So this is what we do in Brighton. So we have this sort of annual health check that happens once a year. You remember the nurse normally goes there, do the blood tests, have a chat with you about several things, all these sort of things. And then you come and see the doctor twice a year. Usually it's about 20 minutes, and you want to discuss lots of things. Usually we spend 2 minutes discussing the HIV because, as I said, most patients are undetectable and with good CD4 counts. So it takes 2 minutes to say, that's all good. Your numbers are good. Now let's discuss the rest. So what happens here is that to discuss all these issues, all these comorbidities, all these health challenges, we spend a lot of time communicating with the GPs and communicating with other hospital specialists. That's really what normally happens. So this is an example of one of my patients that expects me, obviously, as the HIV physician, because he's been coming to the clinic for 20 years, for me to coordinate his care. And obviously, I'll try to do my best to coordinate his care with the GP and with all these sort of healthcare professionals. So I expect him, with all his health challenges, to actually go and attend all these appointments, right? And go to all these sort of things. And that can be quite challenging, because sometimes you get 2 appointments on the same day. So what do? You throw a coin, go to the radiology appointment and don't go to the neurologist. And then you come back in 6 months' time and you tell me, oh, sorry, I just missed that one. I tried to call, but I couldn't really change that appointment. And I'm like, oh, okay, I need to refer you again. Another 6 months wait. And on and on and on, right? So what are the clinical pathways that our patients have here in the UK? So you can go to the GP, very good. They're very good at dealing with primary care, things like hypertension, diabetes, and so on. But they have their own challenges in terms of how much time they offer you, how some of them are interested in HIV issues and all these comorbidities or not. The other option is you go to a hospital specialist services, and you've been to the to the endocrinologist or to the neurologist for a particular condition, because you have a particular problem with a particular organ or system. Or if you are lucky, like we have in Brighton, we have a lot of these HIV specialist clinics. So you can come to things like, have you heard about the Orange Clinic and the Silver Clinic and the Gastro Clinic and so on, where we normally sit with another specialist and trying to kind of look after HIV and specific diseases issues. But you can tell that with some of these, patients have a lot of barriers, because not only are multiple appointments, but also sometimes you face services that are not familiar with the complexity of managing people with HIV. But to me, the most important issue is really the fear of stigma. And there is a lot of stigma associated with healthcare still. And a lot of our patients, a lot of you actually, don't want to attend any of these services because of that. Well, at least don't feel like you want to attend these services. So I think it's complicated for patients, but it's also complicated for healthcare professionals, because we have to kind of try to coordinate these. And it is difficult. So it's been attempts. So it's not like we're not doing anything or trying to kind of figure out what to do. And this is just to show you some of the models of care that have been developed across the world. And some of them are based on consultative clinic models, so having a geriatrician and having a HIV physician both together working with, to kind of address some of these issues about multiple comorbidities, about loss of medications, about difficulties doing activities of daily living and so on. In the UK, there are 2 of those clinics, so one is here and the other one is in London. And some of you probably have attended some of these clinics. But what you notice here is that actually there is no really clarity about who should be coming to the clinic, what we should be doing, what sort of outcomes we should be measuring, and so on. So it's still a lot of uncertainty here about what we need to do. So this is our model here. We have the Silver Clinic. I lead the Silver Clinic. I do it with one of the geriatricians. And what we're trying to do really is not to replace the HIV physician that has been looking after you for so many years. What we want to do is trying to help with some of those health challenges. And I think some of you have attended the clinic. How many of you have attended the clinic? The Silver Clinic? Nobody? Okay, maybe I should ask you to attend the Silver Clinic, maybe no. But normally what happens is we get referrals at the moment, mainly from our HIV physicians that are struggling with patients that have loss of comorbidities, loss of medications, and struggling with falls and frailty. And what we do is we actually spend quite a lot of time, about 40 minutes per patient, just looking at these issues. But the focus is completely different. It's not like going to the cardiologist that is going to look just at your heart. Here, we really look at things like mobility, cognition, medications, how many medications you're taking. Do you actually really need that medication? Also things like multi-complexity in terms of the management of all these morbidities, not seeing them isolated, but just all together. But more importantly, it's more about what it matters to patients most. Because sometimes I think it's important as a physician. It's not what patients think is important. So we had an example of a patient that had quite a lot of different complicated issues. I needed lots of scans and things like that when he came to the Orange Clinic. And we asked him, what is that matters to you most? And he said, look, I just want this itchiness to go. I don't really want to attend any appointments. I don't want to do that. And you just have to say sometimes as a physician, okay, that's fine. We address that. You don't have to go to those appointments. It's all right. So I think what is important for that. What we do in the clinic then is just generate this sort of individualized care plan, and then we just share it with the GPs and with the HIV physician, just some guidelines about what we should be doing to optimize the management of patients. So that's what we are doing at the moment. There are other clinics out there. There's something called the metabolic clinic, which is kind of in between a geriatric clinic and clinics that look after patients with a lot of different age-related problems, mainly comorbidity, that start to kind of to deal with these issues. I think the most famous one probably is the one in Modena that has been doing this for quite a while and contributed a lot to the management of aging patients with HIV. And then there are some other programs there, exercise and rehabilitation programs. And this is quite exciting because I think if there is a silver bullet, a lot of my patients come and ask me, okay, what can I do to improve my memory? What can I do to improve my levels of energy and fatigue? What can I do to improve, chronic pain? What can I do to improve my mental health? And I say, well, exercise probably can do a lot of those things, right? Exercise really is like the magic bullet. And there is lots of evidence suggesting that it can do that, much better than any pill that I can actually give a patient. And based on that, there's been a lot of this going on now. So there is a lot of work done in Canada in rehabilitation with physiotherapy, targeting specifically people living with HIV, trying to get people very active. And we've done some work here in Brighton, looking at physical function, physical activity of our patients, and actually it's a lot lower than that of the general population and a lot less than that of the sort of recommended amount of exercise that people should be doing. And the main reason is because not only people don't feel like going to the gym, because if you are feeling a little bit, you're aging, you perhaps have to use a stick. Do you really want to go to the gym when there are all these guys there just pumping some iron, and looking all beautiful? Probably not. And that's one of the barriers that we see. The other thing is that people, because they have pain, they just think, well, I cannot do exercise because I have pain, and so on. So it's trying to kind of change this perception. So there's been a lot of work going on into that. There is a clinic, a rehabilitation class in London called the Hobler class, which has been doing this for quite a while. And based on that, we started our own here called the Positive Living Program, which again is just trying to do the same, trying to kind of get patients to be more physically active. It's more about having your own goals of what you want to achieve by doing some physical activity. I don't want patients to go and run the sort of Brighton Marathon at the end of it. It's not about that. And we have lots of patients that have joined the program and are really, 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 happy with this. Because even if they have chronic pain, even if they have cognitive problems, mental health issues, they have found it very beneficial. So these are the sort of models of care that are out there. So a lot of healthcare professionals are trying to improve quality of life. We're still not quite clear about what we want to do, but we are trying to do different things. So I think this is the time. This is just to give you a summary of what we are doing there in terms of the exercise class. But really, it's about a lot of the issues. So I just wanted to come here just to finalize with this, really, because it's a very nice slide. So this is a piece of communication that our university did, just looking specifically about this. All the names have been changed and everything, of course. But just to give you an idea about how important it is, physical activity, and how something that is really simple and relatively cheap can actually change a lot of things. So that is really my talk. I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the issues that we face as healthcare professionals, some of the things that are happening at the moment to try to improve that, and trying to kind of have some definitions about really what quality of life is and how we're going to be measuring the quality of life, and if that is the target, how we're going to define it, and yeah, with that, I'm just going to take some questions if you have any questions. Thank you.
Actually, the feedback, I'm really encouraged by saying that there's a focus on movement and moving the body and activity, and that's combined with meeting people, being in a group where you feel accepted. Also, you know, you all have something in common, and naturally in our bodies we're born to move. But like you said, I think a lot of the friends I have and people I speak to at you know, socially in the HIV community, there's a lot of pain. That's usually what they mention. And I haven't so far known how to encourage them to take up a physical activity that they won't reply with, oh, I can't, when I walk my legs hurt, or my neuropathy is too difficult. Yes, it would be good to know from you what motivating, you know, how do you motivate the patients you see to maybe engage with the movement programs?
I think motivation to actually be physically active is quite difficult in any case, regardless of where they're, especially for older patients. Yeah, I think having some goals and some idea about what you want to achieve with any physical activity is important, and also have some idea, in particular in the program that we have, that you don't really need to do much. You just need to do and start moving. And we don't really do great things. This is not about big machines. It's about, you know, just some elastic bands, some movement. That's all is needed. But I think having that goal, saying, well, my goal really is to have more exercise tolerance, because at the moment I'm not able to actually walk up the stairs because I feel really tired. Fine, so that's your goal. Let's do the physiotherapists, and in this it's very important to have physiotherapists on board. They can develop a plan based on the health challenges that patient actually has to be able to do that. This is not personal training. This is not to get you, again, to run a marathon. This is to achieve your personal goal. And then you can start from there. But
does the foster living program happen every day at the Beacon? Or?
At the moment it's once a week, okay. But soon will be twice a week.
Okay.
But we, you know, although it's an open program, people, because sometimes you don't feel like doing exercise, right? So it's not like you're going to be penalized if you don't come to your class. No, it's not about that. But it is important to empower patients to then feel like they can do it, and therefore you can then do something at home yourself, because you know what to do now. You know that you can lift, you know, some dumbbells. So you perhaps can get some and just do it yourself, because although you have pain, you can still able to do it. So I think that is very important, is having that goal and just give it a go. That's what I normally tell my patients. That's why the class is full of my patients that I keep sending there. But I think it has made a difference to some patients. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
If you suffer with a hernia, for instance, would you do the positive living course?
I think you could do it, because you will be doing exercises that perhaps are gonna worsen that. So you might not do resistant exercise, but you will be happy to kind of go on the static bike and do a few courses there. Yeah. So again, it's about making sure that it's all individualized. This is all about patient-centered care and about how individualized things can be. So it's not like this is gonna be the formula for everybody. It's more about, okay, we're gonna assess you, what are your needs, what you can do, what you can't do, and then just trying to make it work.
And how do you sign up for it?
So, Bill, how do we sign up for it?
I think there's a form on the website.
There is one.
Yes.
Yeah, so you go to the website and there is a bit when it says services and it says positive living program, and there is all the information that you need to complete. Or you can phone as well.
So you can self-refer, it's not just professional?
No, we need to make it really open. We didn't want to put any barriers really here. It's about making it as open as possible so people can access it. And it is an advantage that is placed at the Sussex Beacon, because it's a safe place for our patients, that, you know, a place that everybody knows, and it's been a very socialized activity as well, where lots of people can go. It's a group of 5-6 people. They can just go, you know, have some exercise, have a chat, and sometimes we do a few sort of questions and answer sessions as well. So I was there yesterday precisely, doing a little bit of that, talking about cognition just before the class. So yeah, just have a go. But again, just think about physical activity as a potential really, solution for a lot of the issues that the patients have, or that you might have. You have another question?
Yeah, so obviously we hear a lot about people living well with HIV and having an undetectable viral load, and it's not affecting their CD4 count in a negative way anymore. So I wondered why, therefore, people with HIV are still more vulnerable to certain health conditions, like potentially dementia and cardiovascular issues. I wondered if there's kind of research and reasons behind that.
Yes. It's difficult now because there are different cohorts of people with HIV now. So you have the ones that were diagnosed 1990s, 1980s, that were very immunosuppressed, went through absolutely horror, right? With lots of medications, had lots of AIDS conditions, lots of health challenges and so on. So there is a price to pay for all that, in a sense, because there is some physical and, let's say, cognitive reserve that has been lost, like an aeroplane that has 4 engines and perhaps 2 of them have gone, right? So those patients, I think the immunological system has been weakened quite significantly, and that probably has had an impact with medications that were very toxic at the beginning. So a classic example is peripheral neuropathy, for example. Medications that really affected the nerves that we used to use before. We had nothing else, so we used to use them. We have to use them. Whereas the cohort of people that are diagnosed now, they probably are going to have high CD4 counts because they are diagnosed early, okay? And they are going to have medications that potentially are less toxic. So I would say that that population might be different from the ones that we are seeing now, the ones that are aging now, might be very different. So if you look at that population, I think HIV, yes, it was an important factor. The medications were an important factor, and the remaining sort of fight between the immune system and the virus, the inflammation that we all talk about, which affects everything. But I think we don't know really what this new cohort of patients will be facing. Perhaps there's not going to be any issues. We don't know.
I was diagnosed in 1985 and ignored it completely for 13 years, so I wasn't exposed to any of the medication. Only went on medication in 2009. What are the incidents of dementia and Alzheimer's in somebody that hasn't had?
So there is not really a relationship directly between HIV and Alzheimer's. So patients that are HIV, and the data doesn't support the idea that are more prone to develop Alzheimer's disease. So I don't really think there is a relationship there, okay? We talked yesterday precisely about things like HIV-associated dementia that used to happen a lot during the 1990s. But with therapy, that has almost disappeared. Now, there are some cognitive difficulties that our patients are facing, but they are very multifactorial because of comorbidities, because of medications, non-HIV medications, just other medications. So you take opioids, for example, that affect your cognition. If you drink a lot of alcohol, that affects your cognition. Even if you smoke too much, that affects your cognition. So it's so multifactorial that is very difficult. But what we know is that it doesn't really lead to, at least patients that have cognitive issues, the trajectory is not the same one that people with Alzheimer's will have. Now the next question is, would people with HIV, or some people with HIV, develop Alzheimer's? Yes, because there are some specific genetic markers associated with Alzheimer's. So there will be some, because we are aging, all aging, that will develop Alzheimer's, but it's not really a direct relationship.
Okay. I think we have to leave it there for time for the next speaker. We'll chance at this time at the end.
Good evening. I'm a sort of hybrid. I say that because I live with HIV, but I do communications for the British HIV Association. So I sort of have to work with a lot of research and understand what's going on. I'm also on the UK Community Advisory Board Steering Group, which gets me even more research. I'm a trustee of the Sophia Forum, the women's HIV charity. I occasionally speak in Positive Voices for THT, and I'm on the NAT Advisory Board. That's just my spare time, okay? I'm here to talk about one of the research projects that I got involved in, which relates absolutely to what you've just been hearing. And it's gone the wrong way. Like me, I got lost twice. I left here, this room, twice to get a cup of tea, and I got lost both times. So that doesn't bode well. Right. This is putting a lens, if you like, on how it feels and how we can help clinicians and HIV commissioners, because they pay for the clinicians, basically, to understand what's happening and what could improve our lives, basically. As we've already heard, and as you all know, we're sort of shifting. It's almost like a fashion. We all say we're moving from the biomedical model now. We are looking at quality of life. We're looking at the fourth 90. The World Health Organization is talking about function as the third health indicator. Now, that isn't in HIV. That's looking at health generally. So it is the way things are going. What it really comes down to is everybody is starting to realize it isn't about popping a pill. It isn't just about being able to do that and whatever else. It's about how you feel inside. Positive Voices survey, some of you may have taken part in. That's Public Health England's brave and very effective effort to understand what really affects people who are living with HIV. Huge, 4,500-ish people. That is the biggest ever survey. And they are about, I'm not telling you this, but they're about to publish an update which will give yet more information. And that is evidence. You can't have opinion and change things. You need evidence, particularly when it is healthcare that is funded, which it is. Financial pressures are reducing the amount of time that can be given to people at their HIV appointments. Brighton is a shining example of what everywhere should be like. I actually live in Surrey, not so far away. You just don't get any of that in Surrey. You might do in London, near the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. You will do in Birmingham and conurbations. But there are lots of parts of the country where you really will not get that. In Devon and Cornwall, you'll be doing a 200-mile round trip just to get to a clinic, you know. Chances of a referral are quite low. But how can we show clinicians what we would like, what we need, and how can that be measured? Now, this is where patient-reported outcome measures come in. I was part of a 3-year research group which developed these measures. These measures are basically clever questionnaires. And the research study looked not just at patients, but also at clinicians, and also, as I said, at HIV commissioners. And it is a big picture. It isn't just looking at the things we've been hearing. Certainly, I'm sorry about the little worm, by the way, on viral load. It just came up on the slide. It looks nothing like an HIV virus, but there it is. It's not just about comorbidities. Hopefully, it is a way that we can have more control over our life. Now, in the voluntary sector, I don't know who you go to, but you may have come across something like one, Positive UK prepared earlier, which is a holistic wellbeing questionnaire. That enables them, but more importantly, the people they're working with, to measure the impact that what they're doing is having on them. Every 3 months is the way they do it. And the questions are really straightforward. They are, I am able to manage my health, including HIV, score 1 to 5. I am happy with the healthcare treatment I receive, score 1 to 5. I won't go right through them. I have good connections with family. I have good connections with sexual and romantic partners. I think we'll stop there. That's one style, and that's a let's work with people style. The Australian model is about 450 people they trialled this with. Pos, qual, all puns intended, obviously, in this instance. And they believe that the scale that they've worked out as a measure is very effective. Holland, the Dutch tend to be a little bit ahead of things in outlying healthcare, and they are with PROMs. In the OLVG, I don't know how you would say that in Dutch, but it certainly wouldn't be OLVG. In that hospital in Amsterdam, they are using and have been using PROMs for the last 3 years. And it does make a big difference. They presented about it at the last BHIVA conference. And now we come to us. The study was published in HIV Medicine. It's free online if you want to actually read it. But I'm giving you the quick version. This is what it was called. This is the research itself. And that is, of course, research speak, because you need research speak if you want to get funding for research. But basically, it is looking at what is important. The people who were contacted, I've already said to you, go right the way across the health spectrum, but also right the way across geographical locations and different cultures and different backgrounds. Actually, it's not right across geographical location. It was here, Brighton, it was London, and it was Dublin, but they didn't have enough money to go further. Semi-structured interviews, basically that means there is a structure. It's not like an open question, but it is not really guiding people to any specific answer. They started with demographic questions, which is basically who are you, how old are you, where do you come from, etc., and then worked through. And having worked through, people were asked what they thought about the use of patient-reported outcome measures. The domains are those which have already been highlighted, but I'll talk about each one in a little more detail in a bit. So all of these things are things we've already been talking about. Those are things that everybody is always aware of. The one thing that is not frequently mentioned, unless you happen to be a patient, is problems taking ART. Most people automatically say what they believe a doctor wants to hear. I do. It's, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. You're brought up to be very polite and respectful to your doctor. Problems taking ART. I've been told by loads of people they just can't swallow them. I have raltegravir. These are big tablets, It can present problems to some people, let alone how it may or may not affect you in terms of possible side effects. The cognitive problems range from dizziness through to being unable to concentrate. Sleep disturbance is something a lot of people actually do talk about. The things that are not talked about, perhaps in enough detail, and that's why the PROMs are important, is the level of negative thoughts you can have and feel. It's important, if you're looking at trying to measure this, that it's done over a period of time, not on a sunny day, not on a rainy day, not on a day when something just went wrong, but over a period of time. And how you feel about yourself. I know I can feel relatively okay with myself, and I can also just wish I weren't there, and feel really bad and negative. It's something very variable. And in terms of resilience and coping, these things are all interrelated. If you don't sleep well, you don't cope well. You don't feel like you can carry on. So everything needs to be looked at to enable you to live well. Welfare, lifestyle. It's common sense, isn't it? If you don't know where you're living, if you're worried about where you're living, if you're worried about people in the shared house seeing that you're taking HIV medication, you surely are not going to want to take it. And I mean, having known a lot of people who've been HIV positive for a long time, in terms of diet and lifestyle, I remember a guy basically saying to me, well, you know, we don't know what the future is, we might as well drink and smoke ourselves to death. And that was the belief, because there wasn't a cure, there wasn't treatment. And it's unfortunately a little harder perhaps to get out of those habits than it is to actually take them up. And people drink because, yes, it does make you feel relaxed. And yes, it does make you feel better about socialising with people when you're not feeling so great about yourself. Relationship status. It is not easy opening up, starting a new relationship, because you know there is going to be that killer line. Well, actually, I'm HIV positive, you know. And the majority of people don't react well to that. Let's face it, because they don't know anything. One of my missions in life is to get as much mainstream reporting of HIV as possible so that that doesn't happen. I'm happy and lucky with my family and with my friends, but there are people and cultures where even though the person concerned has been diagnosed for more than 10 years, the family don't know, the friends don't know, because if they did know, they could even become violent. It's not just rejection, it goes further than that. Hence, isolation. Independence. It's not so easy if you don't feel well. It's not so easy if you haven't been working for a while. And as far as your general social well-being is concerned, one of the quotes, I brought some quotes from the interviews which I thought would be relevant, is from someone basically saying that they don't feel they can share things at work. They feel like a bit furtive, because if people start talking about their health, their HIV comes into their head and they can't talk about that. Knowledge is quite definitely power as far as HIV is concerned. If you know what you're dealing with, then you can at least manage it, and with the right medication you can definitely control it. And we don't know what the future is. When you start projecting things in 100-person years, which is what happens in research, your mind begins to go into a bit of a, really? And I'm an in-betweenie on HIV, in as much as I wasn't diagnosed 20 or 30 years ago. I was diagnosed 12 years ago. So that makes me a baby in terms of HIV. I didn't have the experiences, the medication, and therefore I assume I don't have the damage, but I have to admit I am over 50. You may have worked that out, but some of you aren't wearing glasses, and a girl can hope, a girl can always hope. And I don't know, nobody knows how I'm going to be, or how people like me are concerned. 1 in 3 women with HIV are over 50. We don't know how we're going to be, because if you like, in a way, we're the first generation to get there. Incidentally, when feeling really depressed, there is a lovely man who's Portuguese and aged 100, and he's still got a girlfriend and living with HIV. I mean, you know, it's not so bad, not for everybody. Knowing about treatment is important, because if you know, you will have the confidence to ask. You probably all know people, I know people, who have been on medication, let's mention no names here, but that they have personally reacted to very badly. And no matter what you say, because it's the medication they know, they will not shift. Even though they could be better, they could be happier. I have a friend who, in fact, I eventually persuaded it was a good idea to change. And she said to me, all of those years, I feel so much better, because she was sleeping. And she wasn't having these bizarre dreams. So it's really important that we communicate, and that's why proms are important. And HIV professionals, all of the best and the wonderfulists, as you have down here, do their best, but they have limited time. And if you don't tell, they are not telepathic, or at least as far as I know, most are not telepathic. You have to say what is happening to you. And if you can put it down in writing, that could be a lot easier. Some people have said to me that they go in to see their clinician and their mind just goes into a zoop, mind fog after they get the CD4 and after they're told that things are okay, and they just don't remember. I mean, my mind does. I didn't try and write it down. Do I remember? No, I do not. And I am not suffering from cognitive decline. It's just Dr. Panic, frankly. Dr. Panic. At a service level, if you're a commissioner and you have the wonderful people like the two I see before me in this room who are saying we really need to have this level of service, you need to be able to say they're right. Look at the better health outcomes we're seeing. Look, these people are not being so ill. They're not needing all of the rest of the services. It's worth it. It's worth investing the money into it. The challenges of any sort of questionnaire or patient research like this is because it's got to work on a lot of different people. There is a concern that if you start asking people to talk about what's wrong, they will start to think about what's wrong and they will maybe exaggerate what's wrong all to themselves. But if it comes out, they can be reassured. So perhaps that's not that bad. HIV care is changing hugely, as we all know. There are injectables round the corner, maybe 2 years, so that we won't be taking a pill every day. And what do you do if you're a doctor and somebody really needs somewhere to live? What they actually really need is to be secure. They need to have enough money to eat properly all the time. They need to have enough money to not worry most of the time. You can't do that, but you can refer them. You can refer them to the right people. Incidentally, absolutely none of this ever happened in my clinic. None of it, none of it. So, what did the people who were being asked about this actually say? You can probably read, but I'll go through for those who maybe can't. They say, oh, write down before you go, which is what I've just said. It doesn't really work for me, so maybe the questionnaire might help as a way of communicating. After you hear your results, anxiety just goes zoom. Well, I can relate to that. You could have new problems coming up where you'd need to identify the problem, but also what is the right referral? That's from a clinician's perspective, by the way. But they should know. We should make it easy for people in HIV clinics to know. The health system should make it easy for them to be able to refer. There should be more COBLA clinics. There should be more of the sort of clinic here. Note, there are two activity centres for people with HIV in the UK. That speaks volumes, really, doesn't it? To be able to answer certain things which are sensitive or you think they aren't good, that's from a patient. And that is basically because, you know, if you want to ask any sort of question about sex, I mean, you know, you're going to go into one of those, cross your legs, yeah, look up, and almost start talking about the weather before you get there, because it isn't easy. None of us like talk about sex to people you don't really know. You don't really know your doctor, and your doctor is worrying about your viral load. How can you possibly go into these areas? Some of the questionnaires will help if you think this was being done every 6 months, which would be a minimum in my view. Then you could see, your clinician could see what had changed in that 6 months. So you could pick up something. This is one of the things the guy in Holland was talking about. He could pick up that somebody really needed support for their anxiety because it was getting worse. Or pick up that somebody needed support with drugs because that appeared to be also becoming a habit which could really badly affect them. And sometimes you don't know how to say it. If English is not your first language, it's intimidating enough talking to a clinician, to a doctor, however nice they are, because of all of the things that I've said that I'm sure we've all shared. You have such respect for these people who know so much, and yet they do have your life in their hands because they're the people that will recommend medication recommend changes for you. So if you have something you can hand in that you have filled in before you came, while you're there, that you've done on an iPad while you're sitting, that could help you. It could also very much help the people who are looking after you. Thank you. Just a couple of quotes. They're really nice. There are some mornings I sail through it blindly. Pop the pills, fine, get on with the day. There are other days when it might be a good couple of hours of real sort of rolling stomach. And I think, actually, particularly with my digestion problems, I think it's best I don't go out for a while. Now, I got a guy in London out of 10 parking fines. In fact, I think it was more, because his digestion problems were so bad that he kept stopping on red lines, double yellow lines, any sort of lines, because he just got to find a loo. I mean, it wasn't all on one day. This was over a period of months. But that is something a lot of people experience. And again, it's something that it isn't so easy to talk about. This I relate to. To be perfectly honest, I can't remember the last time I had a full night's undisturbed sleep. Undisturbed, I have the most extraordinarily exciting dreams. I don't know why. I didn't have them before I took medication, but I absolutely definitely do now. I mean, I was with Rod Stewart a couple of days ago, and I've never even fancied him. But, you know, these things, it's like, really? Yeah, okay. Stigma is so bad. Most of you will have experienced it. I know I certainly have. And it does make you feel closed off. And if you have a bad experience when unexpectedly over the horizon sails someone towards you and they're really rude to you because they hear you say something about HIV to someone, which has happened to me, you don't reply, you just sort of open and shut your mouth like a fish, wanting to actually breathe. And then you think, well, I'm not going to go in that pub again. I'm not going to go out. Because you don't want to face it. And because it is pretty difficult. And on the cognition, now, you know, I don't care if I can't walk, but I've got to be able to think. You know, there are limits to how much this virus is going to get from me. Things like people often report, as they may be slightly starting to age, changes with concentration, memory, forgetfulness, those sorts of things, basic cognitive function. But, as we have heard, that may be more an indication for people who have been diagnosed for a very long time and who did experience these sort of medications you didn't experience. There's also a lot of debate as to whether there really is an impact on your ability to function. I choose to believe that nobody knows, and I'm not going to suffer from it anyway. Are there any questions? Probably not, because this is the man with all the medical answers.
Just one question, just picking up what you just said about memory and stuff like that. Is there actually any medical proof that HIV, age-related dementia has got to do with medication? Or could it be just because they're getting older?
Well, there's the POPPY study, which compares people who are just getting older and people with HIV. Do you want to answer that? It's your thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is. It can be quite difficult because again, you forget your keys today and tomorrow, and then you start thinking, oh, is this because of HIV? Is it because of my medications? Is it because I'm getting older? But there are so many different factors, as I was mentioning before. It could be all these comorbidities. If you have ischemic heart disease, you know, it can affect your cognition. If you have to take medications for pain, it can affect your cognition. If you don't sleep well,
Exactly.
it can affect your cognition. If you go partying all night, every night, it can affect your cognition. So trying to distinguish these things is very, very difficult. We do a memory clinic. I spend a lot of my time telling patients you do not have dementia, because I think that's the concern. Is
I actually did that with my GP and he said, no, you don't have dementia.
And that's quite reassuring because it's it's probably the biggest concern that the general population have, even more than cancer, is I'm concerned that I'm going to have dementia. And we all have experienced that. We all joke about this. When you lose something, it's, oh, you're getting demented, you know, I tell my wife or something like that. So it's a real concern. So I think it's difficult. You asked me about medications. Can medications for HIV cause cognitive problems? The answer is probably not. There's only one medication that has been associated, but it's not proven. All other medications, what we know is actually being on medications is the best that you can do for your brain. Okay? So that's really what the evidence is showing. We don't know. Our patients are aging. What we know at the moment is that people that have cognitive problems and living with HIV, probably the trajectory is quite stable at the moment. It doesn't look like people are developing dementia. It just looks like it's stable. It goes ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. And that might be just because it's very multifactorial. Okay? So, again, most time, all of us, we are concerned about memory issues.
It's also certainly true that if you use your brain, apparently if you learn another language, it's one of the very best things for exercising your brain, for preventing memory loss, for preventing a deterioration as you get older. So start learning French now, Polish, German, anything.
What I
Go
tell
for
my
it.
patients is what is good for your heart is good for your brain. So exercise, you know, it's all these things.
Yeah.
All good lifestyle, healthy diets, and all that sort of things normally do help. What I would say is that, just quoting what Giovanni said the other day, maybe we should have another sort of 90 target, which is that, you know, 90% of our patients reaching 90 years old, but living healthily with HIV. And I think it's all about healthy aging. It's no gloom and doom. This is amazing that we're talking about this now. It is an incredible achievement, to be honest, that we are actually discussing aging issues with a condition that not that long ago was actually killing people, okay? So it is an amazing achievement. And if you look at the general population and you look at aging and satisfaction, the unhappiest sort of time of your life is normally where I am now, between 40 and 50. That's when you're really unhappy. Most people are happiest when they're older because they have the time, because of other things. So I think healthy aging is where we should be aiming for. And just reflect on that, because I think it is important. It's all positive.
So one thing that I have noticed is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of advice really in the general population per se anyway, about preemptively protecting your neurology, say regarding oxygenating your capillaries and, you know, keeping everything open. And so that's just something that I've noticed that in my experience that hasn't been present, and I've had to kind of go a lot more deeply into regarding, say, offsetting any possibility of possible side effects. There is something that I have noticed that dance extremely, learning new dance steps, or say even something like Tai Chi, apparently that's one of the most impactful ways to keep rewiring brain.
The tango then. At the same time, you learn Portuguese and tango.
You know, social activity, exercise, eating healthily, don't drink that much, don't smoke. I mean, these are the sort of things that preserve your brain. But you're right. I think in the past there was not a lot of discussion about, you know, how to preserve your brain and cognition. Now there is more. So it starts even with the sports about, you know, hitting your head and so on like that. That's starting now with the sleep, and schools is starting a bit later because teenagers, you know, the brains need to be preserved. So I think we are having those discussions because science is feeding that. Now with those that are aging, it's a bit more complicated, but it is very complex because it's very multifactorial. But again, what is good for your heart is good for your brain. So that's really just to remember that.
And relationships is one of the single most important things to do. And, you know, the relationship, I go swimming because I'm not so good at marathons anymore, but I do go swimming. You can meet people at the swimming pool. I mean, you just have these sort of stupid little conversations with people, but it's better than not having them.
Yeah.
And, you know, just getting to know people, getting out is important. And you don't have alcohol at pools, I mean swimming pools, you know, which is a good point.
Yes, social activity is important. I'm just going to take this last question because it's really...
It was actually to both of you, and you talked really at the start about how it's all about the individual and it'll differ in terms of the context as to what quality of life is. And when you talked about the measurements, the different, there's a partnership, a group of people working with WHO, UNAIDS, and GNP Plus and others who are trying to kind of measure and define quality of life. And there's this debate as to how much it should be focused on health-related quality of life and how much kind of on social and cultural rights and economic rights as well. So kind of just from your perspective, kind of where...
With the World Health Organization, I participated, I was a panel member at Rehabilitation 2030. There is an overlap with HIV in as much as they had never thought of anything HIV related causing physical problems. That's how I sort of got there. But they were also looking at mental health issues, somebody who'd had a car crash, that sort of thing as well. And that's where the third health indicator, being function, there are different terms for different groups within the World Health Organization, but it does seem to be something which is now recognised, and I think it's really good that there is a trend to look more broadly, because in the past, when fighting disease and fighting illness, it is a very narrow lens, going back to my first thing, and we are looking at a far better, broader picture.
I think that is the case, and it's not only for people with HIV, but with the general population, because we have an aging sort of, population, particularly in high-income settings. So it's all about function, and you are absolutely right. The WHO is kind of looking at that, because controlling physical health is just not going to be enough. We need that sort of general well-being. But defining it, I think what that you did with Richard, that's very important, because it helps to kind of clarify what are the issues specific
Richard's
to our patients.
the professor behind the study, by the way.
Specific to our patients, and then you might be able to really, focus your interventions on that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the key of patient-reported outcomes. It helps patients to identify issues, it helps physicians to relate to those issues, and it helps services to modify what we do and measure impact. So I think we're all going to get used to patient-reported outcomes. You already have completed some. So it's all about kind of trying to complete them best that you can, because they do help. They do help, definitely do. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for coming to the talk. Hope you found it enjoyable. There's now refreshments next door provided by Lunch Positive.
I decided to add live somewhat, as you said, all the sensible things.